So game balance isn't real. I've had several people approach me since this video has released and telling me that I should watch it, I should react to it, I should deliver some sort of commentary, whatever. So we're gonna check it out and see what it's all about, man. I've heard some good things about this video. It is an hour long, but I'm here for a good time. So let's go ahead, kick back, relax.
What is game balance?
Check
if
it
you're
out.
into competitive games, I'm sure you have a pretty decent answer. But can you answer me this question? How do we know when a game is finally balanced? Let me take you back to the early 2010s. League of Legends is one of the most popular competitive games of all time, and on February 16th, 2011, the developers released a patch containing
It has just dawned on me right now in this moment that I never once considered the game balance of any genre outside of fighting games.
the following change for Vladimir's Sanguine Pool. Removed. On-cast bonus, movement speed.
Actually, that's not true, because like when I was playing Pokemon Pocket, I thought about like the balance in that game.
Users rushed online to express how bad this change felt. Vladimir's play rate plummeted, and his win rate also decreased. But here's the twist. The developer had forgotten to submit the files for that particular change, and so it never actually went out to players. Game balance isn't real. Okay, I know that might sound ridiculous and dramatic to some of you, but give me a chance before you rush to the comments to light me up. Let's define some terms. Game tuning is the act of adjusting.
I like this because I feel like oftentimes I come across conversations or interesting topics or whatever, and I'll see people debating or arguing about something without even defining what it is they're trying to argue. And so the fact that he is making the effort to define what it is that he's referring to, I think goes a long way in this conversation, because I feel as though oftentimes I will see two people arguing about something only for me to, from the outside looking in, say or believe that I think you two agree on the points, but you just have different ideas of what it is that you're even talking about. You know what I'm saying? So
A game to achieve a goal. Tuning is a very real action that developers take. Game tuning is real. Game balance, however, is not an act. It isn't something you do. It's a goal. Generally, developers and players alike want to achieve the goal of game balance. When players give feedback to developers, they often do so with game balance in mind. Developers tune the game to try to achieve balance. Again, tuning is the act, balance is the goal. So while tuning is easily defined, we need to ask, what does game balance as a goal even mean if, as we just learned, simply telling players that something in the game has changed when it has not can so deeply affect their perception of the game's balance?
Well, I guess if I were to try to define it, right, balance is the idea that all options within a game are viable and can realistically win regardless of the advantages or disadvantages of each other, right? So the idea that a fighting game is balanced, it doesn't necessarily mean to me that every character is equal in strength. I think that would be very boring. You know, there are going to be better characters and weaker characters. There's going to be good matchups and bad matchups. But the idea, the goal, the ideal is that no matter which character you pick in this game, you can win at any level of play. It might be a bit more challenging, you know, depending on which character that you pick, but it is possible. And I think Tekken historically has done decently with that, but I don't know. We had some interesting times in Tekken 7, and Tekken 8 has obviously been dominated in certain ways as well. But regardless, yeah. I think you want to have the gaps in power between like the top and the bottom not too large. Like the narrower that gap is, the more balanced the game is, I think. I think a lot of modern games these days have taken the approach of making everything broken, like making every character very, very powerful. You take a look at Tekken 8 throughout its lifespan. You take a look at even like a game like 2XKO, in my opinion. I think character power in that game is pretty high. A lot of modern fighting games, I mean, Dragon Ball FighterZ, right? If everybody's crazy, if everybody's walking around with a nuclear warhead strapped to their chest, then the game is balanced because everybody's strong. But, you know, every time I think about this, I always remember a quote from The Incredibles. Y'all remember Syndrome? When everyone's super, no one will be. And it's just, yeah. But anyway.
Game balance isn't real. That's right. Game balance is mostly just vibes. But they're vibes that really matter. Whether you're a developer tuning a competitive game or a player interested in playing or discussing these games, let me explain why game balance isn't what you think and share some of my techniques for tuning competitive games. But first, why should you care about my view on this topic? Let me introduce myself. My name is Adam Hart, but you might know me as Keats in the fighting game community. As early as age 6, my dad and I would compete with each other and create new games together. I started playing fighting games when Street Fighter II hit arcades in 1991, and I got the competitive itch around 1997. The lack of nearby tournaments led me to running my own local events, which got me hooked enough to start traveling the country to attend regional and major tournaments, which led me to evolving my own events into the Regional Major Series Ultimate Fighting Game Tournament, or UFGT, which popular fighting game commentator Ultra David has called one of the most influential tournament series in FGC history. Thanks, bud. During my travels, I scored an EVO Top 8 medal in 2011 by getting 7th place in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars. I was the editor-in-chief of top fighting game website Shoryuken.com for many years, writing about news, events, and co-hosting their weekly podcast, Wake Up SRK. I got into game development when I created Dive Kick with my wife and friends, and then I joined Iron Galaxy Studios to release a commercial version. I also helped Iron Galaxy Studios with Street Fighter III Third Strike Online, Marvel vs. Capcom Origins, and Darkstalkers Resurrection. I then served as lead combat designer on Killer Instinct, the 2013 version, Season 2, and for the rest of the game's development cycle, and then as lead designer on Rumbleverse. On Dive Kick, Killer Instinct, and Rumbleverse, in addition to my many other duties, I was in charge of game tuning, and I interacted heavily with each game's community. In other words, trying to achieve competitive game balance has been a major focus of my career as a game developer since 2012. During this professional experience, I came to view game balance very differently than I did at the start, and very differently than most of our industry. The proof of this view is in the pudding. Endgame Killer Instinct is still considered by many to be one of the greatest fighting games of all time, with major tournaments still ongoing. A lot of players feel its balance is among the best in the entire genre. But before I jump into the meat of this talk, I want to share a quick word about the examples I'm going to use in this video. I lived through nearly all of the events I'm going to reference, but the ones I was less close to required me to do some research. I did my absolute best to represent the facts and feelings of the time.
Hey man, so remember when I was talking about like historically Tekken is pretty balanced? There was a point in time in Tekken 7 where it was considered the most balanced fighting game out. Any character is viable. You can play any character at the highest level of competition. Rain Chu won TWT with the Bears, who were considered the worst character in the game. Character power wasn't like overly high. And, you know, as DLC started to roll out, we started to see more and more that, you know, that clearly wasn't their top priority. I mean, Lydia's release, Falcon Rom's release, Leroy Japan. Everybody remembers Leroy Japan. And then even characters like Geese and Akuma, which Akuma early on was getting like nerfed because he was like very broken. I want to say early on, like super early in Tekken 7, like in Tekken 7 FR maybe. I don't remember because I wasn't as involved in the scene back then. But I know Akuma got nerfed really early on in Tekken 7's lifespan. Then wasn't thought to be like overly powerful, and basically until Pakistan came on the scene, we were like, wait a minute, this character is way more stupid than we realized. Because there really weren't too many people playing Akuma outside of like Rixta and Super Akuma, which Super Akuma was the best player in Europe at the time, or considered to be at least one of, if not number one. I would say at one point he was certainly number one. Other players in that conversation were like Kane and Trench and Fergus. And Rixta, who was, I would say at some point, like a top 5 player. There was definitely a point in Tekken 7, maybe in 2017, 2018, where I would say like the top 5 players in America. Did I say America? Specifically in America were like Jimmy J Tran, Joey Fury, Speed Kicks, Peeling, and Rixta. That was kind of like the top 5 to me at one point. It wasn't until later that some of the other players like Cuddlecore and Shadow would become more prominent and whatnot. And there were obviously other players. Anakin as well was in that conversation, with those previously mentioned. Actually, you might want to put Anakin above some of those guys. But Rixta was definitely in the conversation. Even if you didn't have him top 5, he was somewhere up there, right? And played Akuma, and looking back, it makes you wonder how much of that to do was Rixta being nasty, and how much was it Akuma was dumber than we realized. And it could be both. It could certainly be both. But yeah, this is like a stain on Tekken's history, and in Tekken 7, it's just, yeah, no one's ever gonna forget Leroy Japan, man.
And I want to make it clear that if I use an example in a negative way, that I'm not disparaging the people who made those games, made those design choices, or players who love those games. I want to acknowledge that all of us developers are trying to do the best we can at a very difficult task. We've all made mistakes, me very much included, and I'll probably make more mistakes in the future. The point of this video and its examples isn't to point fingers or say I'm the best or something like that. It's to use our history to observe lessons to help you understand my perspective on game balance. Cool?
Bet.
All right, let's begin. Has this ever happened to you? You're at the GameStop reading the back of the box for the latest competitive game, and the bullet points say 16 playable characters, 12 fighting stages. The gameplay is very fair.
Nope.
I bet you couldn't wait to get home and play the game so you could experience the fairness firsthand. Let's be real. Fairness is not a selling point, and people don't generally buy games because they're fair. Why do people buy games or download them in the case of games that don't require a purchase? Well, the game looks fun. You can do a bunch of cool stuff in it. Explosions, style, mastery. Every person's definition of fun is unique, and the type of fun they seek is their primary motivator when deciding what to play. People also buy games because of FOMO. Their friends or their community are playing and they don't want to be left behind. Gamers will often play a game we don't love just to keep up with our friends.
Some of them are peer pressured by everyone around them to play those games.
Playing it can trigger the desire to not be left behind. Back before post-launch live service update cycles were the norm, the point of a sale was all that mattered. As a developer, if I could get you to buy your Super Nintendo copy of Street Fighter II, my relationship with you ended right then and there. Wouldn't have mattered to me how long you played the game, or what you thought of the game balance, or the fairness, or any of that. Even if the game was deeply unfair, you'd likely only be playing it against your local friends, and none of you were good enough at the game for that to even really matter. So, as a dev, I just hope that I did a good enough job to make you want to buy the next version of the game in a year or two. Now, game development and marketing costs have skyrocketed. Development timelines are only getting longer, and the way consumers interact with competitive games has completely changed. After your initial purchase or download, it's important for developers to keep players playing. If they aren't playing, they won't be around to buy DLC and fill the online matchmaking queues. So now, it's become just as important to keep players from quitting as it is to get them to buy or download the game in the first place, especially if the game is free to play. If you want to stop players from quitting, you need to fully understand why they quit. Players quit because sometimes it's not about the game itself, and there isn't anything you can do. Maybe a new game came out and pulled their attention away. Perhaps real life happened, and that drastically lowered the player's free time. But there are reasons that players quit that you can at least somewhat control. If a game becomes more frustrating than fun, players will quit. If a game becomes more thoughtless than engaging, players will quit. So, to summarize, games no longer are sold in a box and left as is. Competitive games need to last for years just to justify the rising cost of development. Developers are expected to keep players engaged in playing. That means frustration is a real problem that must be dealt with, boredom is a real problem that must be dealt with, and so developers decide on goals, and then they tinker with their games, and this gets called, rather interchangeably, game tuning, or game patching, or game balancing. But each of these terms has their own definitions, and we should not use them interchangeably. Let's reiterate the terms as I've defined them. Game tuning is the act of making adjustments in your game in an effort to achieve a goal. Game patching is the act of deploying updates to the game. And game balance is merely one possible goal of game tuning. But what is a balanced game, really? How do we know when a game is finally balanced? Is it when every weapon...
I mean, the truth is that you're never going to have a completely balanced game that everybody is happy with, especially just in today's day and age, right? Everybody has a different idea of what balance is, and you know, obviously there are inherent biases at play, and it's pretty subjective, right? So no matter how much these developers do, you'll never truly achieve a unanimously considered balanced game. I mean, even with a game like Tekken 7 at one point, or Killer Instinct, I'm sure there are people who still feel like, oh, well, I would change this if I could, or that if I could, or this character could use a little bit more help, but that character could use a little bit more help, but that character is just a little bit too strong. And it wouldn't even shock me if to some degree developers don't want to do that because they want to continue to have you be engaged and continue playing the game, right? Even if they had the ability to just put out one patch that's perfect, like the mythical perfect patch, every character is completely balanced, nobody's too strong, nobody's too weak, and even within that you still have characters that are stronger than others, even if only marginally so, and it's still dynamic and it's still interesting and exciting. Even if that were achievable, they would then have no reason to continue to, like, they wouldn't be able to like keep you engaged, looking forward to more with the game. I mean, I guess you can continue to drop content, right, in terms of like characters or skins or whatever, but I think this whole like patch cycle that games go through is like one of the main things that keeps players engaged and interested in coming back to the game. How many times do you see a game get a patch and then the player count spikes? DLC characters and things like that do that as well, but every time a new, you know, patch drops, players flock back to the game. So it might be within the best interest of a lot of these developers to not try to achieve perfection and to constantly do things, even sometimes intentionally, for it to be a little off kilter, just so people have a reason to. And you don't want to go too far, because obviously frustration can make people quit the game, but it's almost like you want to drip feed them things and keep them coming back to it. So it's like, I could do this in this patch, or we could do that, or we could add this, but I'm gonna wait till the next patch to keep giving them something to look forward to and keep coming back to the game every time they start to step away. So,
or character is used equally or wins equally? Is it when the players have nothing left to complain about online?
That'll never happen.
Even possible. When we tune a game, we're looking to reach some specific, measurable outcome. So a problem we're about to run into is that game balance doesn't have just one definition that everyone agrees on. Each part of the audience for your game is looking for something different based on their own ideas of what successful game balance looks like to them. Most players' primary driver for wanting game balance is the idea of fairness. They think they want a game in which all options are equally viable, and they can rank up or win a tournament with any.
See, and I guess that's where I might disagree with a lot of people, because I don't think it necessarily has to be equal for it to be balanced. I mean, I guess that is what balance usually means, is that it's balanced, right? So it is equal or even. But like, for a game to be considered balanced, it's not a direct, when we use the word, at least when I use the word balance in a game, I don't literally mean like perfectly symmetrical or equal or even. It's more of like a concept than it is like a strict, you know what I'm saying, like one-to-one definition. So like, things don't have, like, every character doesn't have to be the exact same strength level for a game to be balanced, in my opinion.
Character or weapon or team comp that they choose. They want a game where the tools they use are objectively powerful, but are perceived as fair by others, and that those tools are rarely used against them. If the game doesn't feel fair to an individual, that individual gets frustrated. Viewers matter a lot to any modern competitive games ecosystem.
Absolutely. We see this time and time again. And this is part of the reason why balance is important, is because, but that's why it's like, again, like an impossible feat, because spectators, especially, right, viewers, when they're watching an event, a tournament, they get sick and tired and very easily bored of seeing the same characters or the same teams or the same weapons, the same compositions over and over and over again. They want variety. They want things to be different. And the more balanced the game is, typically the more variety that you get. When things are too far in one direction or the other, there are some, let's just keep referring to fighting games, right? There are characters that you'll never see, and there's characters that you always see. You know what I mean? So in order to avoid that, you want to try to have as little of a gap in between like the top and the bottom as you can.
And the viewer's primary drive.
But then again, like, it also can be fun as well to have that. And that's, again, why this is all subjective, because fun is also subjective, and it's about perspective, because having a character that's considered low tier or weak or unviable or not good be used at a high level in the hands of somebody who's a master of that, or a specialist, and takes them to the highest level when it was thought that they couldn't be, is also really hype and cool and exciting. So that's another factor that goes into it. You know what I'm saying? So
driver for wanting game balance is variety. They want to tune into live streams and see like a lot of different characters and team compositions and weapons represented to keep things interesting. They want to see lots of play styles interacting with each other, especially when viewing tournaments. It's a lot less fun when the top 8 character selections look like this.
Man, wow, this is crazy. But man, I'll just never forget this, man. This was...
If the choices being made on screen are too repetitive, viewers get frustrated. And this third one? Yeah, we'll talk about this one later. So how do developers figure out how to tune the game to make it more fair and give it more variety? One common strategy is to survey or talk to players to see what it is they want changed. Another common strategy is to use telemetry to look deeply at data that represents real in-game outcomes, such as use rates or win rates, to try and make it so that things make sense mathematically. And yet, despite trying all of these things, competitive games so often struggle to achieve good game balance. Why is that? Let's break down each of the traditional methods for making tuning decisions and see where they tend to go wrong. Let's start with telemetry. Data lies. On the first day of my high school statistics class, our teacher shared with us a quote from early 20th century Austrian psychiatrist Wilhelm Steckel. Statistics is the art of lying by means of figures. That quote really stuck with me. As it turns out, if you're clever, you can use data to prove almost any point you want. Or worse, data can convince you of a false truth.
This makes me think of Dragon Ball FighterZ, right? Something as simple as character usage might be an indicator to most people of how powerful a character is. If everybody's playing them, they must be good. They must be strong, right? That's not necessarily always the case. And obviously, that's the type of thing that fluctuates and changes all the time, not only just with like patches and new characters being released and everything like that, but also just as players continue to play the game and develop new techniques, strategies, just learn more about the game systems or the mechanics, or just learn new information, right? Case in point, early in Dragon Ball FighterZ lifespan, Goku Black was extremely popular, right? Competitively and casually. There was a point where he was far more popular than Super Saiyan Goku and was thought to be stronger than Super Saiyan Goku, but he actually was not. Super Saiyan Goku was the much stronger character, but that wasn't really figured out until later. He continued to be, popular casually just because he's a popular character within the series. But also just because a lot of people's perception of him was that he was really good, even though at one point he almost objectively was not. So that's just an easy example of like how the numbers of the data is like, oh, well, if this character is being used a lot at this level of play or at that level of play, they must be, a certain level of strength, but it's not necessarily always the case.
Data can be very useful in convincing your development teammates of a design direction, but it's much less useful for finding the right tuning decision to make for your audience. Checking telemetry from League of Legends, you might find that the item Mejai's Soul Stealer has an absurdly high win rate, often close to 80%, but this statistic is highly misleading. The item is rarely purchased unless you're already winning, which means the player purchasing it was already very likely to win before making the purchase. The developers understood why the win rate for this item was the way it was, and that kept them from making the mistake of trusting the numbers alone and making a poor tuning decision. This means that in order to find guidance within the numbers, you need an extraordinary amount of context. Let's say that you look at your character pick rates and one of the characters is very underrepresented. Do we have any idea why just from the numbers alone? Is it because the character's too weak? Or are they difficult to use? Or do they lose matchups to some of the most common characters? Or are they just kind of ugly? Without the reason why, this data is effectively useless as a means to understanding what changes to make in your game. Early on in Overwatch's lifespan, developers saw the use rate of the support hero Symmetra was low, and so on December 13th, 2016, they overhauled the character, changing the way her moveset worked. Developer design notes said they wanted to make Symmetra feel more active and give her more meaningful contributions to the team. Overall, Symmetra players liked the changes, but the use rate barely went up. The players were somewhat happy, but the goal of normalizing the use rate was not achieved. She still wasn't very popular. On June 26, 2018, a year and a half later, Symmetra was reworked a second time, this time moving her from a support role into a damage role. Many Symmetra players lost their fun in this overhaul, and some physically disabled players could no longer play the character at all. The use rate dropped below the original version while simultaneously making the player base upset. Without understanding...
It doesn't shock me at all, because niches exist, right? I don't think that just seems like poor judgment and like an oversight, right? Because instead of trying to change the character into something that she wasn't in pursuit of making her more popular, they should have tried to look more into what causes the people that pick her to pick her, right? What did we do right in that first one that made it go, made her usage rate go up? And instead, double down on that as opposed to changing it up entirely, because now the people who already like her, you're taking away whatever it was that initially drew them to her in the first place. So
understanding why the use rate was low to begin with, tuning the character, or worse, reworking them entirely, is like throwing darts while blindfolded after being punched in the face. Was the pick rate low because Symmetra was weak? Or was it because her toolkit didn't fit in well with the dominant strategies running the game? Or was it because she was only fun to a certain type of player? And if I may ask, is it even a problem that her pick rate was low, or that the game has niche characters that aren't tournament viable? Well, is it? Without context.
No, in my opinion. Every single character in the game doesn't have to have a super high pick rate to me. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you're a game that has a large roster, it's there's going to be a few characters who just this appeals to a very specific group of people, and that's okay. You know what I mean?
Next, data is often worse than useless. It can make you think a problem exists where there isn't one, and it might lead you to making decisions that remove the fun of some of your players. Data without context is dangerous. We should also consider that data is almost never qualitative, and it's easily skewed. Developers that use telemetry to observe the win rates of various characters and weapons will find obvious and large differences when they start to sort that data by player rank. But can we really trust a qualifier like player rank to sort and understand this data? Ranking systems are only good at sorting people who use them a lot. Consider that there are tournament level players who do not play ranked mode often at all, and when they do, they may be much lower ranked than their actual skill level due to their lack of ranked playtime. You must also realize that not everyone in the top ranking bracket is of equal skill, and so this can affect a character's win rate rather drastically even within that segment of players. And within that segment, you may find that certain strategies or characters are barely used at all. Think about what else goes into the win rate. Is this a 1v1 game or a team game? Is the character difficult or easy to use? How do we interpret the stats of a character who thrives in online matchmaking, but struggles to place well in full tournament brackets? How close are the game's best character specialists to reaching each character's known potential? And what don't we know about a character's potential? Even if we could perfectly understand the quality of our win rate data, we simply can't learn enough from it to identify if we even have a problem to address, let alone possible solutions to that problem. Maybe we can spot a lopsided matchup with data from time to time, which can be really helpful in knowing where to look, but it isn't at all helpful in figuring out what to change. Remember, data will lie to you. Using Street Fighter VI's publicly available telemetry, we can see such a case in action. Dhalsim, Lily, Honda, Rashid, Blanka, and Kimberly are the bottom 6 characters in terms of use rates and ranked, both across all ranks overall and when isolating the master rank players. And yet, the characters with the highest win rates in master rank are, in order, Honda, Kimberly, Dhalsim, JP, Blanka, Rashid.
I think this is also the case in Tekken. If we go to ewgf.gg, let me just pull this up real quick. So if we take a look here, so this is the let me go ahead to chat real quick. This is the character popularity, the usage rate of all characters in Tekken 8. So if we take a look here at the bottom, the least used characters in Tekken are Panda, Zafina, Kuma, Shaheen, Raven, and Claudio. That's like the bottom, what he say, 6, like says bottom 6. If we go back here to statistics, where does it show us the win rate? Well, here, right here, the highest win rates. The highest win rates in the game are Kuma, Panda, Claudio, Zafina, and Jack 8, who, I don't know where exactly was his use rate. Slightly higher, still bottom 10. So like, yeah, that often tends to be the case. And I think a big contributing factor to that is because since the character is picked so infrequently, a lot of players know less about that character and are less familiar with the matchup, less experienced against them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're strong. It's more so that like you're just catching more people off guard and just getting away with more. You know what I'm saying? There's just people aren't as familiar because they see it a lot less often. They're not as prepared for that, because most people would not consider really any of these characters top tier right now. That maybe some people think Zafina's pretty strong, but okay, well Claudio was really stupid and still is good, but I don't think Claudio's in like that top 5 conversation anymore. Zafina's debatable, but certainly not Jack, Panda, or Kuma, and yet the win rates say otherwise. You know what I mean? So it's the win rate doesn't indicate that these characters are necessarily super powerful. It's more so just, you know, you see them less, so people are less prepared to deal with it, I think.
So this is almost the exact inverse. And player conceptions of these characters placed in the tier lists bear no relation to any of this data. Most players think Blanka and Rashid are high tier, Honda and Lily are low tier, and ideas about Dhalsim and Kimberly's strength vary wildly. This data could easily lead you to believe that these 6 characters are weak due to underuse, or make you think that they're too strong because of their high win rates. Data without context is dangerous, yes, but even trying to apply proper context to your data is almost impossibly difficult. So if we can't really trust data to guide us,
right, because you have no like guaranteed way to objectively and factually like conclude, you know what I mean? So
we should probably talk to the players in our community, right? After all, they play the most, they're often extremely skilled, and they know the game pretty damn well. Well, unfortunately, even though most of them don't mean to, players frequently lie too.
Not only do some players lie, you know, some people have agendas, you know. They're human at the end of the day, right? So some people are incapable of being objective, of being unbiased. And they don't know everything. No matter how good you are, you don't know everything. You know what I mean? So while I do think having the input of, high level players is important, it's not the end all be all. There have been plenty of times in my history as a fighting game player where I have seen or heard top players say something that I definitely disagree with. I mean, case in point, right? A lot of top players in Japan at one point didn't consider Z Broly very strong. Didn't stop the Kill Sage from whooping their ass. You know what I'm saying? I distinctly remember Sage going to Japan and winning Fighting Tuesday pretty easily with playing Broly at a time where, for one, people weren't playing Broly because he could get fuzzied and stuff. And then also, he just wasn't considered that good by those players over there. And yet they all lost to him. So and I don't think it was, I mean, part of it was certainly because there probably weren't that too many people over there playing him. But hey, man. They were just wrong.
If you've been in or around game dev long enough, you've certainly heard the phrase, players don't know what they want. This isn't entirely true in my experience. There's a relatively well-known clip of me from the wonderful Fight On! Killer Instinct documentary by Hold Back to Block, in which I tell an anecdote about a time when the KI community rallied together and really wanted us to nerf Jago. Specifically, his ability to heal himself by landing fireballs during his instinct mode made them feel like they had to kill him 3 times instead of 2. But nerfing his healing, as they'd requested, would have cut away at the character's core identity and a large part of what makes him unique and fun to play. The community was laser focused on seeing the healing as the problem, and their view of the game was that Jago was either too strong or too frustrating to play against, depending on who you asked. Whether this was the true state of the game or not is not relevant. They believed Jago was a problem, and their perception, no matter how flawed, is the reality they live in. To tune games properly, you must accept this. A player's perception is their reality. So instead of succumbing to the community pressure campaign and nerfing Jago's healing, we took a different approach that allowed us to maintain his fun and unique healing gimmick, while weakening some of the more brainless parts of his kit that allowed him to negate his intended weaknesses too easily. The community cooked us pretty hard for a few weeks, insisting that this wasn't the change they asked for and wouldn't make a difference. But a few weeks after that, complaining about Jago had all but stopped. Players knew they wanted a weaker Jago. It's just that their idea of how to do it would have had way worse knockdown effects on the game and Jago player base than what we landed on. And of course, a very small number of Jago players were unable to adapt to the changes that we did end up going with, and they either switched characters or quit the game entirely. That sucks. But it's a natural part of the tuning process. You can't please everyone.
And you never will. And it is a fruitless effort to try to do so.
But you can limit the negative blowback of a nerf if you're thoughtful. Was Jago too strong on paper? Did he even need to be nerfed in the first place? Believe it or not, it doesn't actually matter. Ultimately, players were frustrated, and something had to be done about that. The something we chose weakened Jago, which is what the players wanted, but the way we did it strayed pretty far from most of the common complaints. So, in a way, players do occasionally know what they want.
You know, what he's saying, I understand. I get where he's coming from. As a developer and creator of a game, right? You have a specific idea or vision that you want to bring to life. You have a vision of what this character is meant to be, what their identity is, and your hope is that you execute it in a way that players also perceive it that way and accept it as such, right? There oftentimes comes an issue though where what you believe a character to be and what they believe a character to be are different. And it becomes a question of how do you get them to either see your vision and understand, or I don't know, it's difficult because even when players think they know what they want, they don't always know the best way to go about it. I think part of the issue with this is that I can understand a developer being like, no, like we really want this character to be designed this way. So I understand that while a lot of you guys are saying it should be changed this way, this way, or this way, we want to find an alternative path to do so because we truly believe that this is the better way for this character to keep their identity intact and express the idea that we originally had. I just don't think there's enough transparency a lot of times with that. I think there would be more understanding if we got more of that, like in a patch note or a dev blog post or whatever. A developer was like, hey, like we hear you, we understand, we know that you guys think this or that, but we really want to try. And granted, no matter how you articulate yourself or what you express, there's going to be people who just be like, y'all just don't care, y'all not listening to us, you're being lazy. You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be, a loud minority of people who are giving you backlash or just throwing a tantrum or whatever. But I do think that there's a really bad lack of proper communication and transparency when it comes to some of these changes that these games go through and why things are the way that they are. It's like, okay, we really don't have an idea of like who it is that you're listening to or why you're doing some of the things that you're doing. And even when they are right, it might not seem like it to us at first because, you know, certain people just think they know more than they actually do, and they don't know that they don't know as much as they think. Case in point, Piccolo was a character who got nerfed many times early in Dragon Ball FighterZ lifespan, and we were all like, why does Piccolo keep getting nerfed? He's not even good. Only for after all the nerfs for people to eventually think, damn, this character's actually really broken. And would have been much, much more so if it hadn't been for all the previous nerfs that he got. So clearly the developers at the time knew something that we as players didn't and saw stuff that we didn't. But, you know, people don't always have that type of awareness or, you know, ability to just admit that they don't know as much as they think they do.
It's just that they don't usually know the least destructive way to get there. Most of your user base will lie to you, but I'll state again, they usually don't mean to. They're generally well-intentioned and they just want the game to get better.
Most people.
But better for who? Even among the most well-meaning users, you'll find that the overwhelming majority of them struggle to see the big picture or consider the viewpoints of others. Their idea of a better game is very commonly one in which they, with their character or weapon of choice, can win more easily. Things that beat their playstyle get weakened, and their playstyle gets stronger, and no one complains about their playstyle so they can feel good about using it. I used to think this way myself, so I'm not trying to cut you down if you currently think this way. It goes without saying that this isn't a good way to make a more fair or less frustrating game, so you need to take every piece of feedback that you get with a massive grain of salt and try to apply as much context to it as possible. Developers can be easily misled by data, sure, but they can even more easily be misled by players.
For sure. This happens in League a lot, where a character drops and slides into an oversaturated playstyle instead of an intended more niche role like the devs wanted, and folks get mad when the patch notes course correct because they were already maining the character in a lane they just got balanced out of. Yeah, and I could see why that makes sense, because like, first impressions obviously matter a lot, and you have people who see a character a certain way, and then when it gets changed to the way that they wanted it to be originally, they now take issue with it. Like, yeah, I could see that for sure. But it's just like, it's funny in a game like League though, because it's like, dog, there are 200 fucking characters in this game. Like, if there's a certain thing you were looking to do, like, I'm sure there's another character who does it. But then again, there's also so many other things that appeal to players and make them pick a character, whether it's their visual design, their abilities, their voice actor, the color of the clothing they wear, like any sort of like arbitrary trivial thing. Because I know I have things like that, you know what I mean? The visual design of a character for me is very, very important. So even if the gameplay of a character appeals to me, just based off like their move list or what it is that they're able to do, if I don't think that they look cool doing it, I'm not going to play them. You know what I mean? So
data can be convincing, but players can be very, very loud and hard to ignore. It is, of course, not possible to know what you don't currently know. But that won't stop players from insisting that their perspective is the truth. After all, to them, it currently is, but their perspective can shift quickly. Players are very easily influenced and misled. Influencer types can, often without even meaning to, construct completely false narratives that large swaths of your user base will bandwagon on and help amplify. Suddenly,
I see this constantly, and I understand like why it is that way, right? Because as a streamer, it's like, I'm not always considering the repercussions of the things that I say in terms of like how people who watch me are going to be influenced by my opinions or my perceptions, or even things that I don't truly believe, but just say in the moment, and then they take that and run with that. I've experienced it time and time and time again, where you see so many people and across all different types of games and genres and communities, right? But in the FGC, I'm decently involved, right? I watch a lot of different players and streamers and whatnot. Like I peek my head in here or there, and the amount of times I have seen people come into my chat or go into someone else's chat and regurgitate almost word for word something that a fellow streamer or player said, I'm like, you have no opinion of your own, either because you're not informed or you just don't think for yourself. You are literally just saying, you're literally just repeating what you heard somebody else say. I don't remember the quote specifically, but I do remember there was a time where I was watching Lord Knight stream back during the DBFZ days, and he said something. And I was watching the stream, but I wasn't talking in chat. I was just lurking. And then a couple of days later, when I was streaming, somebody came into my chat and basically repeated almost word for word what he said, as if it were their own words. It wasn't like they were quoting him or referencing. It's like, it's hard to really give you the context and explain how I knew that without being able to have the exact quotes and give you the context of the conversation, but they said something as if that was an original thought of theirs or their own words. And I simply responded like, yeah, I watched Lord Knight too. Yeah, I know, homie. And they did that to try to appear more informed or more skilled or more knowledgeable on the game than they really were. And a lot of people do that, where they just repeat the things of other people to seem like they know more than they really do, to garner some sort of clout points or respect, or be looked at as somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about, even if they really don't. And then some people are just really impressionable or like easily influenced. You might be somebody who is like, you are, self-aware that like, hey, this person that I'm watching and listening to knows a lot more than I do. So if they say something, it's probably true, and or I like this person, so I'm just going to take what they say and run with it. And you see that a lot as well. And again, people don't do that. Like FeeDX isn't doing that kind of thing intentionally, right? But Fee, as smart and as intelligent, as great as a creator he is, he might say something, may not even mean it, could be true, could be untrue, could be subjective, could be objective, whatever, says something. And because he's so popular, you might have people who like hear that, and then that becomes a new perception of said character or said mechanic or said decision. And now you have all these people who believe that when it may not necessarily be true. So I use him as an example because he's just on screen in front of me right now. But
desires or misinformation of just one popular player can start to sound like hundreds or thousands of people who all agree about what the problem is and how to fix it. Groupthink is a major issue that puts a lot of social pressure on devs that can be very difficult to navigate. And it isn't just influential players or malicious players who can influence a crowd.
I think the other thing as well is that we all understand that it must be a very difficult job to be a game dev and to try to accomplish these things. The other thing as well is that there certainly must be times where you have to swallow your pride and make a change, even if you don't think it's necessarily for the best, just because it will appease the player base, right? You might have a specific thing that you feel or think about the game or this character, but it's like, even if you feel that way and you truly believe there's counterplay to this, or this is crucial to this character's identity, if it feels like the majority, and it's always hard to discern whether or not it actually is a majority, right? But if it feels like everybody has this opinion or this thing, it's like, okay, maybe it's within my best interest or the game's best interest to do this, even if I don't necessarily believe that it is, simply to appease everybody. So it's not, so that this isn't the singular topic of conversation. You know what I mean? So I know that must also be difficult.
Results themselves. Early on, after the launch of Injustice 2 in May of 2017, generational talent Sonic Fox won nearly every tournament they attended using Captain Cold, a character that many at the time thought was on the weaker end of the roster. Sonic Fox's dominant win streak resulted in a community that was forced to reassess the actual strength of the character, and
Sonic does this a lot, by the way, because we saw the same thing in Dragon Ball FighterZ. For those of y'all who've been watching me long enough, y'all remember Season 2 of Dragon Ball FighterZ happens, right? There was a patch. I was playing Android 18, Bardock, and Trunks. There was a patch that happened that changed a lot of things about Android 18. So much so that I wasn't really enjoying playing her as much, and I started to look around at other characters that I wanted to play. You guys will remember, and some of you guys came around later on in time to see that I began playing a lot more Base Vegeta. Base Vegeta was a character that I thought was super sick, was really cool. I was hyped when he released, even though a lot of people weren't. Revisionist history will act like people always love that character, but I remember people were actually very upset about Base Goku and Base Vegeta being released as DLC characters. They said they should have just been base roster and that was a waste of money, and that they were going to be super lame and all those other things. They ended up being two of the coolest characters, the most loved characters in the entire game. And one of my favorite fighting game characters of all time, honestly, Base Vegeta. But anyway, I started playing Base Vegeta, who had been nerfed a decent amount and was considered at that time to be a bottom 5 character. Wasn't very strong, wasn't being used competitively, hardly ever even seen online. And y'all remember I was on stream back then. It's like, bro, I don't know. This character has this tool and that tool. Like, I think this character is really good. I wasn't skilled enough as a player to demonstrate it or prove it, but I was like, I don't know why we think this character is so bad. And then Sonic comes along, does Sonic Fox things, beats Goichi, is mixing people out of their shoes with Base Vegeta. Base Vegeta's top 5. You know what I mean? So again, just further proving that players don't always know as much as they think they do. Certain times, characters, mechanics, weapons, systems, compositions are underexplored. We don't have enough experience. We don't have enough data. There's so many things that are missing. So many, variables and factors, and all it takes is at sometimes just one person to actually put in the work. And it's like, oh, everything that we thought we knew about this thing is actually completely wrong and backwards. And so Base Vegeta went from being considered bottom 5 to top 5 damn near overnight because Sonic started washing people with him.
Eventually, developers that nerfed the character despite Sonic Fox's insistence that Captain Cold was indeed weak and just counterpicked certain characters well. But you don't even have to go on a dominant winning streak to change people's views.
I remember this, by the way.
After Super Street Fighter 4 launched in April of 2010, Right before tournament season really kicked off, many of us looked to our strongest players to assess the power levels of the 10 new characters that were added to the roster. Going into EVO 2010 on July 9th, the widespread sentiment among top players was that Adon was among the weaker characters added to the game. Many of us went into that event writing the character off completely. And then GamerBee took 5th place out of about 1,700 players with Adon that weekend in the largest open bracket tournament we had seen to date, totally upending how we had viewed the character for months without a single balance change.
GamerBee from Taiwan using Adon for all your
All it takes is one player.
Don't believe that Adon can-
All it takes is one player, man.
In an even more dramatic example, let's look at Super Smash Bros. Melee, one of the most popular competitive games of all time, and a game that has not been patched since the 1.02 Player's Choice discs were released in 2003. Melee has a very long and well-documented history of community agreed upon tier lists to rank the strongest and weakest characters. By all conventional wisdom, Yoshi sat as the 21st best character in the game, in a roster of 26. Not good. And then AMSA appeared in the tournament scene and started getting results with Yoshi. Yoshi's rank went from 21st to 12th, from 2013 to 2015, and after AMSA's win at Big House 10 in October of 2022, arguably the hardest Melee major of all time, Yoshi now sits as the 10th best character in the game on community tier lists. Despite nothing about the game changing, Yoshi rose 11 spots in the ranks.
Yoshi, Bobby,
Yoshi is the best of the 900.
I do also think that sometimes it's not always about, oh, this character is actually way better than we realized. I think that often can be the case because, like I said, every character, every like option doesn't always get explored as thoroughly as others, right? And some people think that they know a lot more than they do about these things, thinking that it has been explored by someone else, if not themselves. It's like, hey, well, if this character was any better than we think, somebody would have figured it out by now, right? Clearly not always the case, but I do think there are cases where it's like, no, that person in particular is just really cracked and really good at utilizing the tools that they do have. Sometimes those tools are stronger than originally perceived, but I don't think that's necessarily always the case. I know it's just pure bad luck, but I've dropped League probably half a dozen different times because I'll pick up a new to me champ no one plays, and within 3 months with no balance changes, the community discovers they've low-key been broken for years and they get nerfed. Yeah, I feel that. It's like, oh, okay, all of a sudden somebody figured out some secret tech, and now this character that I've been enjoying that nobody even liked is in the dirt now because y'all finally figured out this champ's low-key kind of nice with it. All right, cool. And forget my fun, I guess. I feel you.
87 competitors.
Again, we simply cannot know what we do not know. Whether it's Sonic Fox thinking their tournament-winning character is weak, or a consensus of top players thinking that a character they don't even main is weak just before a breakout performance, or AMSA believing in their character's power despite ridiculous execution requirements and being the only one in the world who can do it, it just goes to show you how easily players and developer opinions can be swayed by tournament results and influencers. When groupthink and player pressure campaigns arrive at your doorstep, it's incredibly hard, maybe impossible as a developer, to know what situation you're actually in and guess right. Is the character weak or strong? Without many years of evidence, you'll have to make an assumption. You'll be right sometimes, and you'll be wrong other times, and it's a huge part of why tuning a competitive game is so difficult. And of course, when talking about our inability to know what we don't yet know and how that influences the way we think about our passions and the world, I need to remind you, dear viewer, of the Dunning-Kruger effect. We can be extremely confident that we know everything about the state of a game when we, in fact, are only seeing a small part of the big picture. Even the strongest players in the world who are regularly winning tournaments may only be aware of a tiny fraction of what's possible within a play space. And while balanced discussions and tier list theorizing can be incredibly fun, it is for these reasons that players make misleading and unreliable sources of guidance when deciding how to tune your game. Okay, so we can't rely on data or players for guidance, but what about the goals we'd set out to achieve in the first place? Let's examine our list of goals and try to understand if we're even attempting to steer in the right direction. Goal number 1, a favorite goal of players, is fairness. Fairness should not and cannot ever be a goal. Why? Because no two players can ever universally agree on
You also can't like really quantify it.
what is fair.
It's too subjective as well as
that changes by the minute depending on who you ask, the results of their latest ranked match, what salty players showed up on their social media algorithm that day. It is simply not an achievable goal because game balance is mostly vibes. You cannot measure your success by measuring fairness, as the only way to do so, data or player surveys, are frequently misleading. Remember, as a developer, you also don't know what you don't know. Things you think you know may be false, and you are just as easy to manipulate as the players are. Remember that League of Legends example from the start of the video about Vladimir Sanguine Pool? That wasn't the only time something like that happened in League. When the champion Riven was released, she was viewed by the community as weak. Riot devs apparently agreed and hotfixed in some buffs for the character. Shortly after posting the hotfix notes on the forums, the character's play rate spiked and the feedback was very positive. Players reported how good the buffs felt and what a difference they made, but the hotfix hadn't actually gone live yet. The character was unchanged. Game balance is mostly vibes. The idea of fairness is so individual to each player that it can never be an achievable or even measurable goal. Even when groupthink makes it seem like thousands of players have the same view on an issue, their overall feelings of fairness will differ greatly. Only way to tune your game into a state in which no player is complaining is to make them all quit. Because of these reasons, I strongly recommend that we stop using the idea of fairness as a tuning goal. Goal number 2. A favorite goal of viewers is variety. But variety is not the result of mathematical balance or fairness. It's the result of enabling diverse player expression. Let me explain why. Each individual player has their own playstyle and their own view on what aspects of your game or characters are fun. This includes the type of risks different players want to take when trying to win. Some players want to play it as safe as possible and focus on reactions with a low risk, low reward strategy. Other players may want to gamble, taking big bets and trying to get maximum rewards. And everything in between those two extremes exists as well. If a character is harder to learn and pilot and optimize, should that character be equal in theoretical power output with a character that's trivial to learn and pilot and optimize? An easy character.
That's a conversation I feel like comes up a lot. And I am currently of the belief, and this is something I'm open-minded about, and I'd love to have a conversation about this subject with someone, but I do believe that the more difficult something is, the greater the reward should be, right? Just loosely speaking, just in general. But I do believe that the execution required or the difficulty of certain things is often blown out of proportion or like overvalued when it comes to the strength of certain things, where it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, like this is really, really strong, but it's hard to do. And in fighting games, at least, if something is that powerful, somebody out there will do it. We have players out there, like Tekken is a game where we have the Electric Wind God Fist, which is a very powerful technique. It requires a frame perfect input. Frame perfect. You need to do the 2 and the down forward and that crouch dash on the exact same frame. Players are doing it at will, multiple times in a row in singular combos like that. Doing multiple frame perfect inputs, that sounds asinine to the average person, I'm sure. Like, you know what I mean? But if it's that powerful, players will do it. And the Electric Wind God Fist is powerful enough to where it is worth players' time and energy to practice to the point to where they can successfully do that on command with such high consistency. Even things like Taunt Jet Upper. Like, you're telling me you get a free launch. And again, it is very difficult to do, but not so difficult that players don't attempt doing it in tournament. Saw Atif do it a couple of times just recently, you know what I'm saying? In bracket, we've seen Jimmy J, we've seen Low High Knee all do this, you know what I'm saying? Tone, Ty. If it's strong enough, if it's that powerful, if it's that busted, no matter how difficult it is, for the most part, somebody out there gonna put in the work. And if one person does it, it's probably somebody else that's gonna be like, I could do that too. So while I do think it is okay to reward high execution or difficulty with, you know, strong reward or like big reward, I do think at times people will allow, you know, let's just say characters to get away with more than they probably should just because, oh, but it's difficult. It's like, sure, but there has to be like some sort of upper limit to like how powerful something can be despite the difficulty of performing it. You know what I mean? That's how I feel anyway.
Could be considered low risk. A difficult character could be considered high risk. If both risks result in the same.
I will say though, risk reward being so skewed in modern fighting games is one of my biggest issues, and is why I had such a huge issue with DBFZ towards the end of like my time playing it, because it's like you get gigantic reward for very little risk, and I just think it's skewed way too far in the direction of the reward to the point where it makes it unfun, frustrating to deal with, and just overall just very toxic.
Same reward, which character will most players choose? Or to put it more plainly, one character is low risk, high reward, and the other one is high risk, high reward. What I've observed over the years is that when a game is tuned toward a more flat mathematical balance, playstyles start to converge. When this happens, players gravitate towards one of two types of characters. They'll either play the characters that are easiest to win with, thus lowering their risk, or they'll play the characters that look the coolest or sexiest, because the vibe is
I mean, tight, how you done?
We won't often achieve tournament variety by flattening win rate and use rates, because doing so flattens out the number of reasons different players gravitate toward different characters or play patterns.
The better thing to do, more so than focusing on necessarily the strength of these characters, while that is important, is that you have to emphasize the things that appeal to about those characters to players, right? Like he expressed, players have different things that they enjoy, or that, you know, play styles that they gravitate toward, right? You have to make those archetypes stand out, and the things that define them look as cool as possible, as interesting as possible, as fun as possible to those players, within reason. Because oftentimes people do that by just making this archetype or this play style like very, very strong and then very annoying to deal with on the other end, which is what I feel like a lot of games are doing these days, where it's like, oh yeah, this feels very good when you're winning and it feels awful when you're on the receiving end of it. And finding that balance is like the difficult part, right? But more so than like making this character like super, super strong, how do we make it so that the things that appeal to this character, the things about this character that appeal to others, how do we emphasize those traits, those aspects, to make them even more enticing and want to be used by people who like this kind of thing? You know what I mean?
It's the quantity of different motivators that you offer to your players that breeds variety. Despite not being widely considered to have the most balanced roster, the original version of Guilty Gear Xrd Sign would frequently see large variety of characters in tournament top 8s. Why? Because the characters are so different and diverse that they appeal strongly to different player types. Conversely, in the Tekken series, many of the characters share variations of the same game plan and have similar risk-reward values, but in Guilty Gear, almost no characters play even remotely alike. This is why when Tekken misses the mark, it's much more common to see something like 4 Bobs in a Tekken 6 top 8, like at EVO 2011, or 6 Leroys in a Tekken 7 top 8, like at EVO Japan in 2020. If the Guilty Gear developers worked hard to flatten the game using data, they'd end up destroying many players' favorite playstyles, and the result would almost certainly be a game with less variety for viewers. And we did, in fact, end up seeing this in motion at the launch of Guilty Gear Strive, which had top 8s dominated by many appearances of Soul Bad Guy, a character boasting the trifecta of easy to use, powerful, and super cool. Because at launch, Strive was more simple, and many
maybe not so much on that last part.
of the characters felt more samey than in past iterations of the franchise. Players gravitated towards this very easy and powerful badass.
That
Down the line,
//
as
button
new
was a
mechanics
war
and extremely
crime.
unique characters were added to the roster, tournament variety improved a great deal. As a goal, variety is an admirable and understandable one. It's actually measurable with telemetry or by looking at tournament results. And if you aren't hitting a good level of variety, your player base will absolutely let you know. But unfortunately, I believe that you'll have a much harder time achieving variety by making it your end goal. Variety is a symptom of a healthy game ecosystem, not the result of a mathematically balanced game. Variety has another enemy, optimization of play patterns, which I'm going to talk more about later. And finally, the third goal that we skipped over at the beginning, the only real and true
Curious
goal
to see
worth
what this
pursuing
is.
with game tuning efforts: player retention.
Oh, well, yeah.
Retention is all about making your existing players want to play more, or at a bare minimum, preventing them from quitting. Fairness is a cute idea. Variety is nice to have if you can get it.
I mean, that's
but
the
if
most
players
important
aren't
one to
playing,
the developer,
there
right?
isn't any
Player
point to
retention.
anything you might change in your game. We tune the game and engage with players so that they'll continue playing. That is the goal.
I will say though, I get the impression as a player, as a consumer, I oftentimes feel as though retention is not actually the biggest goal or objective for a lot of these games. It feels more often than not, the goal is just to get that initial sale. I don't personally know what's more lucrative between just pure volume of sales for copies of a game versus having longtime players who will continue to spend money on microtransactions, DLCs, future content, or whatever. Especially when you're continuing to provide them with, you know, more updates and whatnot. I don't know what you make more money from, the live service model or the all-in-one. Like I don't know, but it feels as though certain decisions are made to get players foot in the door and not necessarily keep them around. You know what I mean? That's kind of the feeling that I get lately, and I think that's part of the reason why we see so much of this like lowering of the skill floor in fighting games, because instead of trying to create a better product, they're creating a product that's more digestible, I guess, or like easier to get into, as opposed to trying to refine what already exists. So it's like you might appeal to more people and get them to play the game initially, but what are you doing to get them to stick to it? And fighting games don't seem to have figured that out, because while they are growing and have grown compared to, you know, a decade or two ago, right? Obviously, we just saw Evo Japan have like 10,000 players and 7,000 Street Fighter players, and we all saw that first year of Street Fighter 6 at Evo Vegas. Like, fighting games are obviously much bigger than they were, and you got these gigantic prize pools and everything, but people still aren't the happiest. Obviously, not that I ever expect anyone to ever be happy with fighting games and be satisfied, but I don't feel like it has done the best job of getting more people into the genre. And that's something that we're constantly still chasing, right? How do we get people not only to just pick up the game, but then like continue playing it? Because fighting games always see these gigantic drop-offs as well, regardless of how many sales that they generate. And this happens with a lot of games, right? But with some of these like longer standing games that, you know, are meant to last years, I don't know what genre sees a bigger fall off after like that first couple of weeks of that first month than fighting games. So, you know, you might have 40,000 players day one, and then by the second month you might be maxing out at 5, which 5,000 active players on your game ain't too bad. And Steam charts aren't the end all be all, even though those do get constantly passed around on Twitter and whatnot, but they do tell part of the story, not the whole story, but a fraction of it.
We already discussed why players quit, and among the reasons within our control are that they get too frustrated or the gameplay stops being thoughtful and engaging, so they get bored. Using this, we can break down our main retention goal into smaller parts. We need to A, reduce player frustration, B, increase and reinforce thoughtful play patterns that result in engagement, and C, do all of that while trying to enable and maintain a high level of diverse player expression.
I feel like fighting games specifically are so hard to grow / regrow the player base after the first 2 months or so, because new players are just going to get leveled by people who haven't stopped playing. I think part of that is a mental aspect that, like, for lack of a better way of putting it, I almost feel like it's a skill issue, because it's like people who think that way are creating the problem that they think exists. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, like if I try to get into that, and I've been guilty of this myself as well, but it's like you think that you'll get flattened by people who haven't stopped playing the game, and like you and thousands of other people think that way. So now all of you people who think that way, that could be playing amongst each other, that are of similar skill level and experience, y'all could be playing against each other, but instead you're all avoiding the game because you think no one else will be there. And realistically, like if you're playing ranked, right, depending on the game, like you're not going to get matched up against people who've never stopped playing the game unless they're just really bad anyway, in which case it doesn't matter. But I think that specifically is kind of funny, and like I've been guilty of it as well myself. Like I'm not gonna pretend like I have. I was like, oh, I don't want to. It feels a bit late to get into that game now. But for me, it's more so that it's like my issue, I guess, is like how many people will be around my level to play with. Like if I want to get into a game right now, it's like, will I be able to find matches online? It's not necessarily about worrying about, oh, I'm gonna get thrashed. I guess that is similar, but I also would argue that I'm more informed about the player bases of some of these games than the average person who thinks like, I'm gonna just get my ass kicked by, you know, people who've never stopped playing. It's 100% a skill issue, but it's got to be 10 times worse than fighting games than almost any other. Team games will pair you with people who can carry your weight while you learn the ropes. Yeah, I mean that's certainly a thing. I mean, I've been vocal before, and I definitely believe that part of the reason why fighting games aren't more popular is because you don't really have teammates to blame. Like that's a very common belief and train of thought. And it's like, it's really just you versus your opponent. So like, if you're not doing well, you can't point the finger at somebody else. I mean, people will make excuses about anything. Oh, it was laggy. Your character's broken. My character sucks. You were mashing. You were spamming. You know what I'm saying? Your mother's a whore, like whatever. But at the end of the day, like you really have no one to blame but yourself, for real, more often than not. So I could definitely see why it's much more brutal in fighting games than it is in other genres, particularly like, you know, online team multiplayer games, whether it's MOBAs or shooters or hell, even some shit like, I don't know, Rocket League or something. It's like at the very least you have somebody else you can fall back on, but that's not really the case in fighting games unless you play 2XKO. So, you know,
easy, right? Naturally, doing all of those things while keeping a community happy with the direction you're going is not so easy after all. But in my experience, there are strategies you can use to make it work. So here's my approach to game tuning with those goals in mind. To the developers watching this, the tuning strategies and methodologies I use work for me. They might work for you or they might not. My goal is to share with you what I've learned so that you can use the parts that make sense for you and your project. Just remember to always be critical about what you use and why.
Because I mean,
watching this,
Honestly, a good example, I'm just not thinking about, like me with 2XKO. Like, yeah, I played the first alpha of 2XKO, and I might have played it like once on day one of the game coming out. So I really had not that many hours into the game. The game officially released in January, right? I didn't start playing until Akali came out. How long? When was Akali released? March, April? So I got into the game a few months late, and I definitely had some ground to cover and some catching up to do. But like, I didn't allow, oh, everybody else is so ahead of me, I'll never catch up, to prevent me from playing the game. And I do think that is a big mentality thing with a lot of people. I get it. I understand it. I've been there, but it's like, you know, it only prevents you from getting into the game if you allow it. You know what I'm saying? Because I had the question, I was like, because 2XKO isn't like a super huge game either. So I was like, well, how many people are going to be, you know, at my skill level, at my rank, if I try to get into this game now, a couple of months after it dropped, when it already wasn't like that big to begin with? And the answer was a lot more than I probably would have expected. And I've been having a hard time learning the game, but also fun at the same time. And yeah, it was worth my while. So, you know.
I hope you take away an improved vocabulary about game tuning and a wider view of what the goals of game tuning really are. And I hope that you can use this to improve the way you communicate with developers and each other. The classical approach of using data as a metric to measure the success of your tuning efforts is what I'll call tuning for flatness, wherein you try to achieve fairness and variety by normalizing telemetry and survey data. But when tuning, you need to approach the problem less like a banker balancing the books, and more like a beekeeper making sure that the hive is healthy and thriving. Imagine that you're responsible for balancing the environment of Earth.
I hear you, Thunder.
And you get a data report and discover that there are 20 quadrillion ants on the planet, but only 3 trillion trees. If you believe this is an imbalance, you aren't in the right mindset to tune a competitive game. A version of Earth with 20 quadrillion trees would have no space at all for anyone to exist. A version with only 3 trillion ants is going to cause serious ecological disasters as the food chain collapses. Good game tuning has a lot more in common with musical composition than it does hard science. It requires harmonious choices, purposeful and intentful imbalance of volume and frequency and tempo to achieve the desired emotional effect. What works in one song won't necessarily work in another, which means one game's right answers might be totally wrong for another. All aspects of your game need to harmonize and come together to be stronger than the sum of all of its parts. I call this tuning for harmony. When tuning a game, you're the conductor. Your job is to lead players emotionally where you'd like them to go, not follow the player's whims or manipulate telemetry numbers. A game that is tuned for harmony is trying to achieve retention by creating a game state in which the highest number of players can each have their own unique brand of fun, express themselves, and stay engaged. This is a harmonious environment where joy and passion can thrive. Any imbalance that you put into place with intent is, based on your vision for the game, there to make it more interesting and exciting. It isn't an accident. Mathematical imbalance in your telemetry is not seen as a problem under this lens. It could be a symptom. Mathematical imbalance
I want to go
more
back to
interesting
this.
And exciting.
So tuning for harmony, improve retention is the goal. The validation is an active player count. So there are multiple methods: smooth out frustration outliers, smooth out risk reward outliers, or build trust with users through communication and strong vision. These methods are often employed singularly or together. I think 2XKO is doing a great job right now of employing all three of these methods. This third one, build trust with users through communication and strong vision, is something that I feel like fighting games are lacking a lot these days. I don't think vision is made very clear. It's in fact very confusing to a lot of us, like what the vision is or what the goal is, what they're trying to do. And then there is a lack of trust because of a lack of communication, and because if you say one thing and do another. We've experienced this time and time again. Like, there's not a lot of trust right now between the Tekken community and Tekken 8 or Bandai Namco. I guess it is improving because of the last couple of patches, but they have quite literally just lied to us, like said one thing and then done another. So it's like, you know, again, fighting games, I don't think typically do too well with this third one, but maybe that's changing for the better. Who knows?
It isn't an accident. Mathematical imbalance in your telemetry is not seen as a problem under this lens. It could be a symptom of a problem sometimes, but it could just as well be that the imbalance actually makes the whole stronger. How will you know the difference? Well, in order to tune for harmony, you're going to need a few things. First, you're going to need to put someone on your team in charge of game tuning, and that person needs to be able to play at a high enough level to feel the real game. They don't have to be tournament champions or the best in the world, but they should be strong enough to play alongside players of that caliber. This player needs to be under a few mandates. Number one, they can't play in tournaments, so they can't be selfish about tuning.
Again, this is a model that 2XK was following, because that's you have players like Apology Man and like Yohozi and many others who are working on that game. So
I'm not saying no one on your team can compete. I'm just suggesting that this one person should not compete in the game that you are making. They can feel free to compete in other games to scratch that itch. Number two, they shouldn't even have a main character or weapon. And they should spend their playtime using the characters or weapons the community think are the weakest, and against strong players using the characters or weapons people think are the most offending to see if they even agree. Number three, they should try to think of the game as a whole, play the whole roster relatively well, and understand what aspects of each character are the most core to their identity and fun factor. A player who, say, only uses grapplers or only uses shotguns and can't get out of their comfort zone is going to struggle in this role. Number four, they should try to understand the feelings of players at various skill levels and keep.
And this is something I always try to do a lot, that I think a lot of players don't think about or even attempt to do. Consider various skill levels. I think it's difficult, right? Because most players aren't capable of this because of whatever skill level that they're at. And which is why I feel like it's easier for me to do, because I'm not like directly in the middle, but I'm an intermediate level player who feels like I can connect with the higher level and the lower level. When you're bad at the game, there's so many things that you don't know. You don't even know what you don't know. There's so many things that you can't comprehend, you don't understand. And then the level above that, people think that they know and they don't. And then there's a level above that and a level above that, right? At the highest level, there are players who like, they're so far removed from being able to relate to those players. Even if they at one point were that themselves, they're oftentimes so far removed that they can't even get back into that mindset or have experience with dealing with certain things, because they just view things so differently and have answers to things that those types of players don't. I feel like me with my skill level, I feel at times like a bridge between the two, like the scrubs. I consider myself more of a scrub than like a high level player, and also the high level play, because I am very engaged and, you know, I do keep up with these events. I'm in contact with a lot of these players. I'm able to reach out to them and talk with them. And, you know, I've put a lot of time into, you know, trying to see both sides, like both worlds of like the lower level or just the online play, and then like that more competitive scene in the highest levels of gameplay. And I've certainly noticed that like oftentimes, you know, the lower level players, which you should, it's expected, right? You expect them to be this way. They have, well, I mean, it's not that they shouldn't be considered at all, but some of them genuinely just don't have a clue what they're talking about. So they oftentimes will suggest changes or complain about things that are either a non-issue, or suggest changes that are like, would be game breaking, or, you know what I mean? And at the highest level, they suggest things at times that they don't understand would be detrimental to that more casual player base. You know what I'm saying? So it is difficult. I understand why one side or the other would be incapable of doing it or would oftentimes overlook it, but I do think it is very crucial to consider. And it's something that the developers have to do. It's like, how do we make this character who's considered broken at the lower level and then garbage at the top level, you know, more interesting, more fun, stronger, more balanced, whatever the case is, right? And like Goku Black, for example, who for a long time was considered very powerful, even though he wasn't, and then was eventually went on to be considered like one of the weaker characters. But like for the lower level, like for people who just mash auto combos in 2H, Goku Black is busted. So it's like, hold up, y'all gonna buff Goku Black? He's the most broken character in the game. To SSB Goku 67, who's angel rank, and then everyone else is like, I mean, he's actually kind of like bottom 5. I don't know where Goku Black ranks these days in the series, but everyone else is like, he's actually like a bottom 5 character. Like we think he could use a lot of changes, but you know what I'm saying. So
each bracket of players in mind when tuning. You don't tune to give weaker players a chance against more experienced players.
Every game has like that noob check or that scrub killer character. It's like, this character stomps all the newbies and sucks at the high level.
But I believe it's crucial. This person is your lantern in a dark cave. Without them, you'll be lost, and you'll spend most of your time guessing your way back to the light. If you don't have this person on your team, you're going to have to find them externally and hire them. Next, listen to your players. Seriously. Players lie, but you still need to hear them. Players are often right about the symptoms, even if they don't understand the best ways to fix the problems. If you can, find a few players who love your game and have a better big picture sense than most, and talk to them a lot. These players are your canary in the coal mine. Don't take what they say at face value, always think critically, but a discussion with these key people can lead you to the right choice.
Sajam, I think, is probably the perfect candidate for the face of what we're talking about right now. I think out of everybody, so I was using myself as an example because I do feel like I fall into that, but Sajam even more so. Fee as well, I would say. But Sajam is the one that when I think of like somebody who's very in tune with community, the dev side of things, the high level, the lower level, he has like this perfect blend and harmony of like experience competing, playing at a high level, dealing with the scrubs, and you know what I'm saying? I just feel like he has like the eyes for this and the ears for it. It's great that he showed him on screen because I do think Sajam is like the perfect exemplary piece for that.
Is much more quickly and
even more so than like a Max. And I love Max. I think Max is incredible and one of the greatest creators that we have and one of my personal favorites. But I think he excels even because Max falls a little bit more to the casual side. Sajam falls a little bit more to the competitive side. But I think Sajam can reach further into the casual side than Max can at the higher level at this point in his like career, so to speak. And I don't say that to like discredit Max or anything like that. I say that with all due respect. I just think Sajam is maybe a little bit more tapped in with that than Max is, just from my own perspective or opinion.
Or keep you from making major mistakes. On KI, of the hundreds of players I spoke to, I trusted exactly 2 to give me the kind of feedback that helped me validate or make tuning decisions, and maybe 10 more to give me thoughts that were helpful. I learned who was who by chatting with the players a lot and being observant. Even with their help, we didn't make the right choice 100% of the time, and you won't either. But you should try to find your key players and make your success rate stronger. As you get information from telemetry and player sentiment reports, filter it and test against it rigorously. It's critical that you do not knee-jerk react to the things you hear, and it can be extremely difficult not to when influencer groupthink pressure campaigns arrive at your doorstep. You need to deploy changes quickly enough to minimize frustration, but you need to be measured enough to know when a problem is being overblown or a solution that works for your game has not yet been found. As an example, in Killer Instinct and Rumbleverse, I found that an average of 3 to 4 weeks worked for non-catastrophic issues based on those games' audiences and goals. For catastrophic issues, every day counts, and you need to get those fixes out in 2 to 3 days if possible, while communicating often with the community. In most phases of game dev, there's a mountain of work to do and not enough time to do it all. So how do you prioritize your work and attention? During development, before you even have players, you need to spend time and energy on features that will let you deploy quick game tuning changes without full and expensive title updates. These hotfix systems could literally save your game's life. Once your game is out, stay alert for mega frustrators. Things in the game that are so far out of bounds that players won't tolerate them until your next major patch. Use your hotfix system and nuke these from orbit. There's a lot of competition for players' attention, so don't give them an excuse to quit and play something else. Early on in Rumbleverse, players discovered a bug when double bouncing using a stop sign weapon that allowed them to safely drop a city block-sized instant kill damage zone with 0 counterplay. Our next patch was 5 weeks away, and our user base would have shrunk to near nothing in mere days if we had been unable to fix this issue. Thanks to our hotfix system, we were able to get a fix deployed to players in a few days instead of the 5 weeks it would have taken if we had to wait for our next major patch, ensuring that most of the frustrated players retained. Nailing this built trust between us and the players, so that if something like that ever happened again, they'd help calm each other down knowing that we'd likely fix it quickly. There are, of course, some common mistakes to avoid when tuning. You should avoid focusing on individual character versus character or team comp versus team comp matchup tuning. Conceptually, these things are big buckets of variables, and it's way too easy to get lost and cause unexpected knockdown effects in other areas of your game if you take on something so broad. You should instead spend time on much smaller and clearer details, which I'll discuss in this section. You also need to avoid overreacting or reacting too quickly if the severity of the issue isn't high. I
think players themselves could often could do better with this one. As a game dev, I can imagine this is very, very important, and probably important to keep in mind because players will overreact, so you have to make sure that you don't and make hasty or rash decisions or judgments because of the initial reaction or knee-jerk reaction from players.
Severity by the level of frustration it seems to be causing. Validate it yourself by playing against it and see how pissed off you get. So after all that, what exactly is my method? First, I start by thinking about the big picture of risk versus reward across the entire game. So many tuning decisions can be more smartly made if you're able to correctly assess both the risk and reward of common actions in the game. Any new character or move you put in the game has to match this framework that you've conceptualized. Let's see some basic examples of risk versus reward and assess them. Think about headshots in shooters. If you aim for the body and you miss left or right, you hit the arms. If you miss low, you hit the legs. If you miss high, you might get a headshot. Your risk of missing when aiming for the body is at its lowest, and the reward is usually standard damage. If you aim for the head and you miss low, you hit the body and you get standard damage. But if you miss left, right, or high, you don't hit the target at all and deal no damage. The reward for a headshot is vastly increased damage output if you can land it. As a system, the risk-reward of headshots makes logical and practical sense. This is a good example of an extremely common and effective risk-reward system that breeds thoughtful play, as both aiming for the body or head are effective, but carry different levels of risk and reward that change as you switch weapons, distances, fight targets that move at different speeds, or even increase your own skill level. Now let's look at a risk-reward problem.
I have no clue what I just saw.
For example, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. If you use Magneto's heavy attack, which is slower and harder to land to start your combo damage will be high enough to kill even the sturdiest characters in the game. However, if you start your combo with a quick light attack that comes out fast and hits low, and it's one of the easiest moves in the game to land, your combo damage will still be high enough to kill even the sturdiest characters in the game. The lower and higher risk options both have the same reward. So in this case, skilled players will almost unanimously gravitate towards using low risk attacks since the outcome is the same no matter what. Let's compare that to another game's take on this. In Guilty Gear Strive, using a quick punch or kick attack has less combo options and scales the combo's damage and hit stun duration more harshly. Using a slower slash or heavy slash attack gives you the highest damage combo starters and lets you combo more generously. The lower risk option here has a lower reward. This gives players a reason to use more of their options in various situations, rather than falling back to the easy and quick ones. The next thing to look out for when hunting risk-reward problems is unjustified inconsistency. Let's check out Killer Instinct. In KI, every character has a 5-frame quick attack, but not every character has the same range or properties on their quickest attack. Not all of them get the same level of reward. Is this a problem? If the designers made these choices randomly, it might very well be. But if you deliberately design weaknesses into the character kits to compensate for their more extreme strengths, which is usually where their identity and fun lie, it could be perfectly okay to have a character whose quickest attack has poor range, or one that can't be rapid fire cancelled, or one that can only successfully combo into one specific unsafe opener special move. Context is everything. Equality will flatline the playstyles. Risk-reward should make sense within each character, but also across all characters. Consider the characters Saberwolf, who is one of the easiest characters to play as, and Arya, who is the most difficult character in the game to play as. As I mentioned before, high difficulty is a risk, as the player has way more mistakes they could conceivably make in a match, and their options may be much more difficult to optimize. In a game tuned for flatness, perhaps Saberwolf and Arya should have a similar potential at top levels of play. But when balancing for harmony, we must acknowledge that Arya's high difficulty means she should have a higher number of top-level advantages than other characters. Her higher risk should be justified by a higher potential reward. If an easier character could match her potential, almost no one would invest time into the character. Imbalance can absolutely ruin a game, or imbalance could create harmony. How? If each character's moves are not built equally, there's an imbalance in their strengths and weaknesses. Without the imbalance of high-risk, high-reward characters living alongside low-risk, low-reward characters, player identity gets stifled. You need to find the right mix. So long as the risk-reward values across your game make sense together, player identities will shine through and create variety and reduce repetitive play patterns. For instance, low or no-risk tactics that have high rewards, such as safe jumps in fighting games, can be simultaneously boring for the attacker and very frustrating for the defender. Try to use this line of thinking to identify outliers, and then study the characters or situations these outliers belong to so you can understand if they're a problem or not. Be purposeful with your design. Build in deliberate strengths and weaknesses, and commit to them. This is not scientific. The developer responsible for game tuning is going to need a strong vision, a clear understanding of their target audience, and the ability to step back and try to feel all of this from a distance and see the big picture. The next thing you need to stay on top of is frustration. The opposite of frustration is fun. And so these exist on a single...
This video is pretty recent, as evident. Well, I mean, you can see it was uploaded not too long ago, and also with some of the footage that's within it. This is obviously very clearly intentional some of the topics that are being addressed, some of the things that are being said, some of the points that are being displayed, like fun versus frustration. This is another thing that I've talked about a lot lately, you know, risk versus reward, and how things are very skewed in rewards favor for a lot of characters in a lot of games these days. Fun versus frustration, where a lot of games make it feel very, very good to win and perform things with your character, but it feels very, very bad and very, very frustrating to be on the receiving end. And again, I think there needs to be more focus on that frustration aspect right now. And he may feel the same way, or has gotten the impression from players that they feel the same way based off social media and whatnot, which is why he's addressing it in this point.
Will scale together. Some frustration is okay, and it can even be good for your game, so long as frustration doesn't overtake fun for your target audience. Imagine leaping off a building in a game with fall damage versus one without. The game without fall damage is definitely less frustrating, but it also lacks the adrenaline rush of attempting the leap and finding a way to land safely despite the danger. Neither of these approaches are wrong, it's just that each better suits a different audience. When an individual's frustration outweighs their fun, they quit. In a single player game, this part.
I ain't gonna lie, I don't know if I've ever played a game that didn't have fall damage and was like, damn, that was lame. Like, let me go ahead and jump off the 300-story building and just land like Superman. I ain't gonna lie, that shit probably gonna hit every time. Nah, I get what he's saying though.
Really easy. In Zelda Breath of the Wild, the fun is in exploring and traversing this massive, handcrafted world, solving puzzles, getting into battles, and then you have to interact with the very frustrating menus to cook food and manage your inventory, and then all of your weapons break. Some parts of the game are fun, and some parts are frustrating. They pull on each other within me to help me decide if I should keep playing or quit. So let's explain the fun-frustration scale a bit better. It weighs my own personal fun versus my own personal frustration. This scale represents me, not the game itself. This scale is not about truth, it's about my relationship with the game. If the fun side weighs more, I keep playing. I'll place weights that represent my personal enjoyment from exploration, puzzles, and combat on the left side. The fun side of the scale is heavier now, and so it moves down. Fun weighs more. And now I'll place weights that represent my own personal frustration from having to cook or navigate menus, or when my weapons break. Maybe the weight of your personal frustration from, say, weapons breaking is less than mine, and that would be reflected on your own personal version of this scale. As you can see, the total weight of my fun in Breath of the Wild is heavier than the total weight of my frustrations. If we make the cooking interface a little better, the weight of my total frustration lowers, but the weight of my fun doesn't increase, because improving the cooking interface doesn't improve the exploration, even though it does improve my overall relationship with the game. Remember, the lower side of the scale is the one that's winning out. Even in competitive games, some frustration is totally unrelated to gameplay aspects of the product. Like if it takes you 3 minutes to simply log into the game and another 8 minutes to find a match.
Dog, it used to take forever to load up in Guilty Gear. Nah, that was definitely a frustration in Tekken 7. The load times in Tekken 7 were so bad. Even when you were rematching, like, it took so long to get back into a match. Like, you can kind of easily take it for granted these days in Tekken 8 because, like, it's so much snappier and so much faster now, but boy, it used to be so ass in 7. Goodness gracious.
Because it is extremely common that one player's fun is exactly the other player's frustration. The more fun you let a player have, the more frustrated their opponent on the receiving end of that fun is likely to be. I think
a lot of developers are forgetting that these days.
We all understand that players quit because frustration overtakes fun, and this
and people will still run into the death match.
The scale gets heavier.
That's real dedication.
But it can also happen if the weight of the fun side gets lighter. If I make something less frustrating for the victim, it may reduce fun for the attacker. It's very often zero-sum. In this example, this individual's frustration about being hit wasn't very high in the first place, and didn't change when combos got shorter. But because they enjoyed doing long combos so much, the weight of their fun dropped, suddenly causing frustration to outweigh the fun for them. This change may have drastically reduced the frustration for another player and improved their personal scale, while causing this particular player to consider quitting. In the gameplay of competitive games, you generally can't make things universally better for everyone. There will almost always be a give and take. Because of this, you need to communicate heavily with and keep an eye on your community to see frustration trends appearing. And you need to move quickly to test against them to see how valid you believe they are. Some frustrations can be healthy for a game. Remember, This is an ecosystem. High highs are rarely possible without low lows. What you need to look out for are mega frustrators, things that are so annoying to deal with that no matter how fair their risk-reward values may seem, that they have to be tuned or you're going to rapidly lose chunks of your audience. We often only make game tuning decisions around risk and reward with top-level play in mind. We do this because factually, mid and lower-level players are not able to observe the whole of the known game yet and are extremely unlikely to notice the risk-reward tuning that we do. But when tuning against frustration,
Let them tell it though.
we need to consider all levels of play. In Killer Instinct, Gargos has a Portal Punch move, a tracking projectile that can start a ranged combo. This move was easier to deal with at higher levels of play. Its risk-reward values mostly made sense, it had counterplay, and it fit the character's kit really well. But at mid to low levels of play, this move became a mega frustrator. The answers to it, while available and plentiful, were not apparent enough at those levels of play, and the move was causing a number of players to threaten to quit. We tested against this claim as best as we could and ultimately agreed that this move had crossed the line for that level of play. As a result, we adjusted the move quite a few times to find a spot that still worked for top level play, but was much less frustrating at other levels of play. Even at low levels of play, if a player feels like their opponent can beat them with just one brain-dead tactic, which they'll often call spam, they'll frustrate out of the game.
That's just another aspect that I just really do not envy about game devs, because it's like, let's say you're a really skilled player, right? You're playing at a high level, and if you're this skilled enough, you're always gonna if you're that skilled, you're always gonna be able to adapt and adjust whatever. And if a change that you dislike that strongly happens to a character you play, you'll probably just pick a different character. You know what I mean? If you want to continue playing that game, but it's gotta suck. Like, I have this character that I really like, this gameplay style that they have that I'm really fucking with. They move set, this move in particular, and like it gets changed because the bum niggas at the bottom of the barrel don't know how to block. And it's just like, bro, like if you would just do this one thing, it's so easy to beat. But you know what I'm saying? And how often is it really something like that? Like I can't speak on, I've never played. Well, I tried KI like once. I really wasn't into it. I never went back to it, but I don't know. I can't speak on that move in particular, but it's just like, I can imagine being a player, like even at my skill level, like I'm an intermediate level of play, and be like, damn, bro, I really like the way that move worked before, and now it gets changed, and it has to, like, I have to, adjust and change my play style because the niggas 6 ranks below me don't know how to block for longer than 0.5 seconds. It's like, it is what it is, though.
Importantly,
it's just got to be really tough to, like, again, find that balance, because, like, how do we adjust this move to where it's no longer crossing the threshold to where it becomes a mega frustrator for the lower level, but is still useful and enjoyable and fun to use at the higher level, you know what I mean? So sorry, I keep referencing it, but Master Yi can never be great in League high tier because bronze players will never figure out how to stun him.
There is a limit to how weak we were willing to make this move. After a certain point, we had to let the community know that we were not taking the move out of the game, and that if they were struggling to deal with this version of the move, they'd need to practice. Our goal isn't to solve the problem for everyone, but to reach a compromise that still might ask some players to overcome their frustration.
Damn, that I said get good.
That you're listening and they believe in you, they will invest effort on their side more readily to overcome challenges and minor frustrations, meeting you in the middle. That means sometimes, yes, asking players to learn or practice is a part of the bargain. Speaking of brain dead stuff, we need to prevent people from getting bored. On a moment-to-moment level, this makes thoughtless gameplay our enemy. You're spending a lot of time not making meaningful decisions, even if the base actions feel great and have great feedback.
I think a lot of those kinds of things are solved by good communication from the developers. I agree. It just feels like not enough developers have really good communication.
Remember our Rumbleverse stop sign nuke example? This technique was extremely frustrating to get hit by, but was super fun and funny to do to people at first. But once you mastered the movement needed to do it, which to be honest wasn't very hard at all, it became a thoughtless way to play. You'd land in the world, find a stop sign, nuke a city block, repeat. Brain off. So even the people using and abusing the technique were experiencing disengagement due to the degenerate play pattern the stop sign nuke represented. Long combos or block strings in fighting games with zero or infrequent defensive mechanics can also cause a lot of disengagement. Players across many genres do not respond well to losing control of their character. In fighting games, you lose control of your character every time you get hit. My own small-scale studies show players starting to disengage and have frustration spikes on average between the 6 and 8 second marks of losing control of their character. Obviously, some individuals, especially in the FGC,
I somewhat get where people are coming from with this kind of thing, but maybe it's just because of the types of games that like I play and I enjoy. But this is just such a non-issue for me. Like unless I'm dead ass in like a 30-second to minute long combo, which I guess like can't happen, but like I don't know, man. Like, but I also am biased in the sense of like I enjoy performing long combos. That is one of my fun factors. That is one of the things that like for me outweighs. Like for me, the amount of fun and enjoyment I get from performing a cool long combo far outweighs the frustration of like being hit by one and being in said combo. You know what I mean? But I know that's obviously been a big talking point in Tekken where people feel disengaged or annoyed or bored or all these different things. It's funny to me that like the only game I've ever really seen this conversation in is Tekken. I mean, not to say it's never existed, but like I've never seen it like be such a prevalent thing in the games that I've played. But I also haven't been, you know, I wasn't like big in the FGC during like Prime Marvel, so I wouldn't be so shocked at all if like that was a conversation or point of contention back then, you know, in that game's prime. But it's as long for my like 10 years, I guess at this point, of like actually following the FGC and really being tapped in, I've never seen it be like this hot of a conversation or topic and something that constantly gets brought up. And it's just ironic and funny to me that it exists so much in Tekken, because it's like Tekken combos are shorter than like every other game I play. Like you compare a Tekken combo to 2XKO or DBFZ or like any anime game or 2D game or whatever, it's like their wish. Now, what I will say is that Tekken historically just doesn't have combos this long, so Tekken players are not conditioned to be able to deal with that and be okay with it. Also, a lot of these other games do have other mechanics. Like even if we compare like arena fighters, like the Naruto Storm games, or like a Sparking Zero, right? You have super counter, you have substitution jutsu, you have burst, you have break, you have these mechanics that are built to get you out of a combo, so that you're not always just in there no matter what. I'm not always the biggest fan of those mechanics personally, because like to me, I'm just like, nah, nigga, you got hit. My reward is you gotta hold that. You know what I'm saying? But fortunately, oftentimes those types of systems, they are limited. You know what I'm saying? Unless it's Sparking Zero, where you could just super counter whatever you wanted. Obviously, I took great issue with that. A lot of people didn't at first, and they realized that I was right, and they changed it for the better. You know what I'm saying? Is what it is. Neither here nor there. Point is that like, you know, we have this mechanic that you can use, but you can't just use it whenever you want for free. You have a limited amount of uses, or it has to be done with a certain timing, or you have to like build it back up after being hit for so long, whatever. Tekken doesn't have that. Tekken doesn't have a get out of jail or like a get out of combo mechanic. There is no combo breaker. There is no burst. There isn't anything like that. So I think that's part of where the frustration comes from. But I've just never been in a Tekken combo a day in my life and been like, damn, bro, like, when is it my turn again? You know what I'm saying? The when is it my turn is when I'm like being looped with plus on block pressure, or like I get knocked down and I can't get back up and that kind of thing. The when is it my turn again is like when I'm in a 40, 50 second like block string or something like that. It's not when I'm in a combo. To me, I'm just like, all right, yeah, I got hit. I got to hold that. You know what I'm saying? But I maybe I'm just the outlier on that.
GC have an extreme tolerance to this and can routinely sit through repetitive 40-second long combos on the receiving end. But this, in my experience, is not a critical mass of people. I'm not saying you should never make a game with long combos. I'm just suggesting that you need to understand the kind of audience you're trying to retain. And if the long combos do exist, find ways to make them more varied and or less frequent. Disengage.
The other thing as well, and I forget what game it is. I always forget when I bring this up. It's either Arcana Heart or Melty Blood. You could also do other things that keep the player engaged by giving them something to do while they're being comboed. If you're going to have a game that has long combos, I've never played a game like this, but it's either Arcana Heart or Melty Blood. I forget which one. But if you do your opponent's combo while they're hitting you with that combo, you can reduce the damage. That's really cool. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a really cool mechanic. I've never experienced that for myself, but that is something that can help keep them engaged and also like helps them improve the game and just learn more, because it's just like, you low-key are learning how to play the character a little bit, just from like needing to know that aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of sick.
Players on defense are very likely to quit, but disengaged players on offense are, believe it or not, also likely to quit. Game balance and target audience are extremely related. It's not just that the audience has its own feelings about game balance and what frustrations weigh the most to them, but also that different types of game balance attract and repel different types of audiences, and different audiences self-select into different types of games and game balance outcomes. Let's look at 3 example scales. In the first, developers worked very hard to sand off every frustration they could, regardless of how much fun had to go to achieve that. Even though the weight of the frustration side is light, so is the weight of the fun side of the scale. This can result and even very minor frustrations feeling oversized, and make spending time with the game feel not worth it because the fun it delivers is sterile or bland. Players of this game have less reasons to quit, yes, but they also have less reasons to play. In the second scale, developers didn't really care about frustrators, so this theoretical game has a very high frustration weight, but it also has a very high fun weight. You'll notice that the ratio.
And maybe this is just the approach that 2XL was taking, because there's a lot of shit in that game that pisses me off. But that Akali Ari duo sick as a motherfucker. I ain't gonna lie to you now, baby. That shit for the hell. But I get so bad every time I play that fucking game, but I still be wanting to play.
Of the scale is similar to the first, but the actual weight of each side matters a great deal. While the audience may be smaller in this type of game, the immense weight of the fun side of the scale is going to have the players who can deal with the high level of frustration calling this a favorite game. Some players call these kinds of games kusoge, Japanese.
Yeah, it's going to break my heart when they finally nerf Akali and Ari.
And disparagingly all at once. It's fascinating.
It's alright though, by that time Tokan will be here, right,
which
chat?
Is probably the ideal goal for developers for most projects. Frustrations were addressed carefully in ways that, while inevitably did lower the weight of the fun side a bit, didn't overdo it. This scale is indeed the healthiest of the three examples, as the weight of the fun is still high, and it vastly outweighs the frustration side. That's why it's so important to know your audience. None of these three results are wrong or bad. They just serve different people. As you tune your competitive game, you need to keep your target audience in mind. I highly suggest using Quantic Foundry's data on player motivation to help segment your audience into buckets you can more easily understand. There will be people outside of your target audience who will try your game, and the majority of these people are unretainable. In this example, our core audience member on the left is happy, but our player from outside the core group on the right is having less fun, because this isn't their usual kind of.
Again, like it seems like this video is all obviously very intentional, because this is again like one of my frustrations, not with games, but not like within the games, but outside the game, is that it feels like there's a lot of focus put on the non-core audience as opposed to the core audience, where it's like more often than not, you are more likely not going to retain those players anyway. If you're even English, motherfucker, do you speak it? Take two. More often than not, it is unlikely you're going to retain these players if you even manage to get their foot in the door in the first place. So to me, the emphasis and the focus should be on your core audience, because they're the ones who are going to stick around long term and are the people that you're going to be getting support from and supporting vice versa via future patches, content updates, whatever the case may be. So I don't know. It feels like the focus has shifted to me. That's how I feel as a fighting game player, that they are catering more to non-fighting game fans than fighting game fans at times these days, trying to get them into the genre and help grow the genre. I don't know if it's necessarily working, but that is how I feel oftentimes. And I think this is a common sentiment that has been expressed a lot, which is again why I feel as though this has been put in this video.
Game, and their unfamiliarity adds even more frustration. If the weight of their frustration is so high that reducing some of it still leaves their frustration outweighing their fun, the game just isn't for them. But if you insist on trying to reduce the weight of their frustration, you may be cutting away at the fun of your core audience, which could also result in some of their frustration suddenly outweighing their fun. In this example, we made changes that made the game less frustrating for people outside the core audience by changing things in the game that were not frustrating at all to the core users. The result of that was a loss of fun for the core players. We failed to make enough of a dent to retain people outside the core group, and now we've put a portion of our core audience at risk of quitting too. Not every edge needs softening. If you're lucky enough to make a game that lasts for quite a long time, you may also encounter players who, despite loving your game and thinking that it's relatively well-tuned, are becoming bored from repetition. At this time, you'll have to weigh the reward of doing some kind of tuning shakeup to get people re-engaged, against the risk of that action frustrating a vocal and influential part of your community. The Street Fighter VI community is going through this right now as of filming in early 2026.
Even Japan had this patch.
Many in the community feel the game is well-tuned, but still want a big shakeup anyway because they are becoming bored. Matches are lacking in surprise or discovery, and the feeling of "I've seen it all" is hurting their experience.
I feel like every single day I open up Twitter, I see niggas talk about how fucking boring, annoying, and broken Mai and well, it was Ed for a while, but like Mai especially still to this day, and like everyone just hates Mai. I'm just like, see, that shit crazy, because that looks like the coolest and most fun character in that game to me. and she pretty as hell. So like, yeah, niggas over there, oh, my lobster too buttery, my steak too juicy. I'm seeing 6 mines in every top 8. I'm like, go ahead, bring her over here. You know what I'm saying? My fault. Maybe I should play Street Fighter.
Back to play pattern optimization. Optimization is the enemy. I'm not talking about software performance here.
Meanwhile, I'm about to have to deal with fucking Yuji though.
Gameplay choices to minimize risk and maximize reward. Optimal combos, option selects, unbreachable map positioning, etc. You need to make a game where the right answers are much more obscured, or better yet, much more plentiful. You want a game where surprise and discovery can continue for as long as possible post-launch. For instance, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3's fast-paced, neutral, and rapid decision-making is one of the best parts of the game and has lots of surprises and memorable moments even 15 years later. But when I land a hit with virtually any attack, it becomes very clear what I should do. I should perform my very long combo with little to no reason for variation and kill your character. This optimal play gives me maximal reward with minimum decision-making, so long as I can execute, and takes up a large portion of the time spent playing during any match. During the combo, a skilled attacker is only engaged at the start as they try to stabilize the opponent and decide if they need to burn X Factor or any meter. The defender should try to engage the entire time no matter how long the combo, in case the combo drops on accident or a reset is attempted, but focusing for that.
Marvel vs. Capcom was really dope. I have a lot of respect for this game and everything. I understand like its legacy, its history, its impact on the FGC, all of that. Fighting games as a genre. I get all that. I said it a million times before. I'll say it again. If this game would have dropped today, niggas would think that shit is a 2-pack of ass. People, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 would not be what it is. That game is certainly a product of right time, right place, a different era, all that. If that game dropped today, niggas would be, oh boy, what?
That long without meaningful decisions.
That game would have never survived.
And it also results in disengagement and frustration. Street Fighter 6 steps it up by obscuring optimal combos quite a bit better than Marvel vs. Capcom 3. When you score a hit, the starter you used can matter a lot more. You need to look at screen position, your drive meter, your opponent's drive meter, your health, your opponent's health, what round it is, your own super meter conditions to make sure you can decide how to best optimize what combo to do, how much resources to spend. This game is much harder to optimize, but ultimately it can be done. Top level play in Street Fighter 6 after a while has virtually every player using the same combos in similar situations once those players are fluent enough in the game to know the optimal answer in each situation. Though you do see some player expression variation, with some high-risk players spending more drive meter to burn themselves out on purpose more frequently, while others are more conservative with their gauge if the combo isn't going to kill or checkmate. Street Fighter 6 makes the right answers more plentiful, more diverse in risk-reward values, and they take longer for players to optimize because there are so many variables. Ideally, you want to make a game where, instead of the right answers being difficult but ultimately possible to optimize, players are presented with a variety of correct answers, each representing their own risk-reward values. So instead of a community working together to solve the game like a puzzle, after which conformity of playstyle begins to occur, players will instead focus on making the choices that best fit their own personalities. Player expression breeds variety. Imagine a series of possible combos all starting from the same hit confirm. Each does more damage than the last, but is also harder to execute than the last. This may seem like a proper setup for risk and reward, and it isn't a bad way to start, but at top levels of play where execution starts to become irrelevant, what you'll get is a push towards optimization and conformity instead of expression and variety. Trying to create a system in which different combo routes give expressly different outcomes and have their own advantages and disadvantages beyond executional requirements will ensure that players can play their own way. Variety,
which is something that Tekken is lacking, and we've talked about at length before, where the game has become so homogenized, and again, the lowering of that skill floor, and just reward being all in one. And you used to have to decide between things like, do I want maximum wall carry? Do I want Oki at the end of this? Do I want maximum damage? And that would give you the ability to express yourself as a player by the decisions that you made and showing like what you valued most. And, also situational awareness will play a factor in this as well. But, certain players would value certain things more. Like, I just want max damage all the time. I want the Oki because I want to mix you up. So I'll sacrifice the damage. I value the wall pressure, like whatever it is. But now, like in Tekken 8, you kind of get all of that in one. Like usually the optimal combo gives you the best of all of those all in one go, which wasn't always the case and hasn't been the case in like other games as well. I mean, and not to say that it's never existed or that it doesn't exist in other games. It's just that historically wasn't how it always was.
Isn't just in character or weapon selection, it's also found within the playstyles of the people who use the same characters or weapons if your game is harmonizing correctly. Harmony is not about making it hard for players to find the right answer, it's about giving them many right answers and letting each player lean towards their own favorites. In game design, all things should be done with intent. If someone asks me why I made a recent design decision and my answer is, I don't know, then I messed up. I may be forced to make a suboptimal decision from time to time due to various circumstances beyond my control, but I should still be able to clearly express why the decision was made. And you need to work very hard to make sure your players know that you move with intent. This means your patch notes need to communicate both what you're doing and why you're doing it. You need clear, detailed, thorough notes or videos that include reasons why your team chose these changes. Even if players disagree with your reasoning, they should be able to see clear intent. If they can see intent, trust will build, and it will often keep them from labeling you as someone blindly throwing darts to choose balance adjustments. I originally wrote a version of this talk that you're watching now back in 2019, and in the time between then and now, I'm very happy to report that developers across all the games that I play and watch have improved drastically in the area of patch notes.
Okay, I wasn't sure where he was going with that. I'll give you that. I would say have drastically improved in what? Because they've regressed in most of these things we've talked about today. But in that one aspect, yeah, I think that, you know, when it comes to the explanation for some of these, although there are some games out there that, you know, hey man, hashtag more viable in scrambles. Anyway.
Keep it up, thank you. As you tune, you will make mistakes. However, a community that has trust and confidence in you will tolerate those mistakes with lower levels of frustration, and will generally perceive the state of the game's balance more favorably because, after all, game balance is mostly just vibes. Vibes that you have a heavy hand in establishing and influencing. Remember, the process is not hear about the problem, followed by fix the problem. The process needs to be hear about the problem.
So this video, again, I can't stress enough how many of these topics and points that he's like addressed and made and brought up have been, you know, recent discussions. You know what I mean? Again, this video is very intentional. This video is very like relevant. This video is very recent. There are a lot of things addressed in this video that have been talking points for various games. And I wonder if there's like any game in particular that he has in mind or that he's looking at, or a certain community he sees, or if it's just the fighting game community as a whole that like made him want to make this video. Obviously there's constantly discourse online about every game. It seems like no community is ever satisfied and every game sucks. That's what it looks like on the outside looking into the FGC, right? But yeah, I wonder if there's, I guess more so than any game, is like if there's any group of no, if there's any games developers in particular that he's looking at, it's like, man, y'all really fucking up over there. You know what I mean? Like, I as a developer himself, like, I wonder if there is a game he's looking at, it's like, dog, like, y'all need to be better. You're not doing this, this, and this. You need to do this, this, and this. Because this video comes across as though it's advice to developers. You know what I'm saying? More so than anything. And yeah, I just wonder like what it was that spurred this.
Investigate and decide if you even agree it's a real problem. Use everything you've learned to find a solution to the problem that weighs all of the other problems that need solving, and how that solve might hurt or destabilize other parts of the game and the audience. And then communicate with your players. So, to wrap this up, I believe a balanced roster isn't one where every character has an equal shot at winning, but it's one where there's a little something for every type of player within your core audience. I once heard a player ask why developers couldn't just balance a game before it came out. And as I hope you understand by now, that would be an impossible task because the audience, who will eventually decide what balance even means to them, haven't even touched the game yet. Tuning for harmony is my personal method of game tuning. It served me well across KI and Rumbleverse, and I hope you learned a lot about the goals and hazards of game tuning from this talk. If you're in charge of tuning a competitive game, you should do what works for you and your community. If you really believe in tuning for flatness or whatever method you use, and it's working for your team, and you're achieving your goals, that's rad. Keep doing that. If you want to try some or all of my methods, that's cool too. I'll make myself available for consulting with folks in the industry who do this kind of work if people want that. Just hit me up on Blue Sky or wherever and we can work something out. Whatever your personal takeaways are, remember that game balance isn't real. It's not a hard, objective thing that we can measure and take scientific actions to fix. In reality, it's just a person's fully subjective perception. And not only that, our views can change on it, even by the day, and even when the game itself hasn't been adjusted at all. Instead of fixating so strongly on something so impossible to pin down, I believe designers should focus on much more important things when tuning a game. Those things are communicating clearly with your audience, minimizing their frustrations quickly and thoughtfully, and keeping them engaged with lots of interesting decisions to make, and surprising them with cool new interactions each time they play. And most of all, as a dev, tuning a game, or a player reacting to patch notes, don't panic. If you made it to the end of the video, I hope this gets your brain flowing and makes discourse around game tuning a little stronger overall. And maybe as a bonus, it encourages gamers to give the devs who do game tuning a little more grace. I have a lot more to say on this topic, so condensing it down into this still pretty long video is quite the challenge.
Yeah, I would like a follow-up video, a part 2.
Just drop a comment, and I'll try to check it out. I want to thank Double A for his hard work helping me write, execute, and edit this video that I've wanted to make for so long. I'd also like to thank Noah Sasso, Ultra David, Infilament, Mean Salty, and Ski Sonic for their help editing the script. The intent of this new Game Design Direct channel is to deliver more developer talk straight to you, so if you're interested in that, go ahead, click like and subscribe and all that stuff that you usually do on YouTube. If you're a game designer or interested in giving a talk in this format on this channel, contact me and we can discuss it. Thanks for watching.
That was great. That was a great video. I really enjoyed that. Like I said, so many things that he addressed in that video are like recent talking points, relevant like conversations that we've had like recently. And yeah. Came in on the tail end of this video, but it was really good. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. That video originally got linked to me the day it was uploaded, I think, by Van. It's been 2 weeks now, so I certainly took my sweet time getting around to it, but better late than never. But yeah, man, that was good. That was good. I have no clue how I'm gonna put this on the channel because there was so much. Like, I don't know how I could. Part of me is wondering, like, should I just like upload this whole thing in full, or should I try to edit it down? I don't know. It's almost 2 hours now. I also feel like I don't necessarily want to upload the whole thing of just like my reaction, because then it feels like it takes away from like his video. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel like I'm stealing it. I don't know. I'll have to think about that and figure it out. But I'm liking, I'm subscribing, and here's the link to the video in the chat if you guys want to check them out for yourselves and, you know, like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. But great video, great video. That was certainly worth the watch.